The ABCs of intellectual property, trade and business in these destinations respectively. And a vital factor in entrepreneurship is protecting your idea before it becomes something big. So we will be hearing shortly from an expert on this subject from the United States. And since we are also looking at Indian startups expanding globally, we will also dive into a brief discussion on the policies that the United Kingdom has in this regard, coupled with what Canada as a destination has to offer to startups and entrepreneurs. I think we are all set for that, so I'll take a brief moment to invite our panelists to be seated on the dais. Can we have Mr. John Cabeca, United States Intellectual Property Counselor for South Asia, US Embassy. And Ms. Caroline Rowett, British Deputy High Commissioner, founder, Excel Scout. So I think first let's hear from the UK perspective, right? The person that we are about to meet first up is a career diplomat with over 30 years of experience in both London and overseas. And her time in London saw her working on a range of portfolios from human rights to the British overseas territories to even Afghanistan. Now her previous 30 years have also seen her posted in France, Indonesia, the Bahamas and Haiti. Most recently as Charge d'Affaires in Haiti. And she's been around the globe in the true sense of the word globe-trotter. Because she carries this global spirit, we were delighted to have her with us on this panel. And she assumed her current role in February 2021. At present, she represents UK in 4 Indian states of Haryana, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab and Uttarakhand. You can add to that the Union Territory of Chandigarh. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from Caroline Rowett, British Deputy High Commissioner. The podium or the hand mic, the choice is all yours.
Thank you. Gosh, it's a big room and there's lots of people here. And I'm quite heartened that you didn't all walk out after that last session and that a few of you have stayed to hear us. I can't promise that it will be as exciting and entertaining as the past session, but we'll do our best for you. So I'm delighted to be here today to talk at such a vibrant event. I'm going to go back into history a bit here now. So back in 1846, Richard Cobden inspired people with his belief that free trade would be the greatest revolution that ever happened in the world's history, drawing men and women together, thrusting aside antagonism, and uniting us in the bonds of eternal peace. Well, that revolution continues with us today. UK's approach to trade and investment is helping to create jobs and introduce the world to the best of Britain. As we recover from COVID-19, we need to think radically about how we generate economic growth, about how we're going to use our global platform to promote free and fair trade. In 2020, we negotiated trade agreements covering 63 nations and the European Union. In 2021, we championed free and fair trade. And now this year, in 2022, we are promoting modern rules that are relevant to people's lives with digital and data trade. We are championing high environmental and animal welfare standards in a science-led approach. And we're pushing for modernisation of the World Trade Organization and trade agreements to reflect the values of free enterprise and fair play. We are building an advanced network of trade deals from the Americas to the Indo-Pacific, with the UK at its heart as a global services and technology hub. Because more trade equals more jobs and lower unemployment. A job means independence and security, better funding for public services and for infrastructures. The deals we've done with our partners across the world, from South Africa to South Korea, mean that our traders continue to enjoy preferential access to world markets. For example, Scotch whisky, one of our biggest exports, continues to enter markets like Singapore tariff-free and stays recognised. All in all, this adds up to £885 billion worth of trade that we've secured. This platform allows us to show our full potential as an independent trading nation. At the G7, we've worked to reform the World Trade Organization, make progress on data and digital trade, and promote greener trade. Our new UK global tariff we'll see around 57% of our imports entering our market tariff-free. We'll eliminate tariffs, in particular, on over 100 green goods. In short, our new tariff regime is lower, simpler and greener. Furthermore, we're working across the world to drive forward free and fair trade, setting the global standard for trade in the 21st century. This applies equally to membership of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, one of the largest and most exciting free trading clubs in the world. Joining it is part of our plan to grow our economy by making it far easier for British goods to reach Asia and the Americas. This high standards agreement will align the UK with some of the world's fastest growing economies in a free trade area covering nearly £9 trillion worth of trade. Sorry, that's a big number and difficult to say. In February this year, we moved into the second and final phase of negotiation to join this club. In addition, we're working closely with India on an enhanced trade partnership, reflecting our mutual interest in technology and innovation. We've launched an emerging markets trade scheme, which will offer the lowest income countries a better deal when they're trading with the UK. We are loudly and proudly championing exports in our key industries, from our food and drink to services and technology trade. We have a network of trade advisors across the country ready to help our businesses go global and to help foreign countries invest in the UK. With our GREAT campaign, which you might have seen in the papers here on Tuesday, we're showing partners worldwide that Britain is ready to trade. In 2020, the Prime Minister launched our new Office for Investment, which is working to secure investment in every region of the UK, based in the Department for International Trade and working in close partnership with the Prime Minister's office. We're rooting our approach in our fundamental values of sovereignty, democracy, the rule of law, and a fierce commitment to high standards. With fellow democracies around the world, we're championing innovation, a cleaner planet, women's economic empowerment, and much more. After a challenging 2 years, we all need to look forward to an optimistic future which delivers jobs and prosperity for everyone around the world, so that we can all support our values and realise our full economic potential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was indeed lovely. And next up, it's time to hear it from Canada. So his association with the Department of Foreign Affairs and International Trade goes back to 1998. And the years 2010 and 2011 were all about his role as the Deputy Director of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Response Group, when this group was actually coordinating Canada's responses to the earthquake in 2010 and in Japan in 2011, right? Now the years 2000 and 2003 are those when he first served abroad at the Embassy of France, and then came the Embassy of Serbia, where he was the political counselor, followed by the embassies of Sweden and South Korea. Well, he too carries a lot of global perspectives with him, so let me now invite Patrick Herbert, Consul General of Canada in Chandigarh. Over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the very kind introduction. I'm very honored to be part of TICON 2022 in front of such an impressive audience, and I know many friends of Canada. The fact that so many of you have decided to spend this beautiful Saturday afternoon in a conference room, I think says a lot about the importance and the value of TI Chandigarh. So congratulations to the team who put together the conference this year. As you may have heard from the bio, I've been in India for less than 4 months now, but it has been a great 4 months. In fact, one of the very first meetings, or business meetings, I had after my arrival was actually with TI Chandigarh, together with some of my colleagues from Ontario. And one of my colleagues, Kapil Malhotra, is here today with us, so we're well represented in Chandigarh again today. So of course, with a meeting with Thai Chandigarh, my assignment here started very well. But in those 4 months, I also got to spend some time with our Minister for International Trade, Mary Ang, who was in Delhi last month. At the time, I also attended the annual gala hosted by the Indo-Canadian Business Chamber with some 200 participants. And I have to say, after 2 years of COVID, it felt really good to meet in person, as it does today, with so many business people involved in the Canada-India trade relations. And during her visit, our Minister for International Trade and her Indian counterpart, Minister Goyal, announced the formal relaunch of the renegotiations for the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, CEPA. This is extremely good news for anyone interested in business with Canada, including for tech entrepreneurs who are already active in Canada or with Canadian partners. But today I won't spend much time talking about CEPA. Our trade negotiators are busy working on it. But we know from our other free trade agreements, including with the US and the EU, that this is very positive, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of those negotiations. What I would like to do today is just take a few minutes to talk about business opportunities in Canada for entrepreneurs like you. So, most of you will be aware of the thriving Canada-India trade relationship, which has seen exciting growth over the past decades. And despite the disruptions we've seen caused by the pandemic, the value of Canada's economic partnership with India is estimated at roughly 100 billion Canadian dollars. And behind this impressive number is a rise in Canadian companies engaged in India and vice versa. In fact, Canadian businesses have ramped up their long-term investment in India because they believe in this market. Large Canadian investors like Brookfield, the Canadian Pension Plan, and Fairfax, just to name a few, clearly believe in the India growth story. In fact, in the past several years, these companies and others have invested about 70 billion Canadian dollars into projects across India, including in real estate, infrastructure, renewable energy, and financial services. It seems like almost every week when I read the news, I see another story about a major investment in India by a Canadian investor. And in fact, just in the past few weeks, the Canadian Pension Plan announced new investment worth almost 1 billion Canadian dollar in India, including a significant investment in the media unicorn Verse. What is great is that investment to Canada from India also increased significantly. And some of you in the room are part of this success story, and would love to hear from you today and during my time here in Chandigarh. In fact, it's more than 100 Indian companies that have invested in Canada, including most of India's biggest IT companies. These Indian companies can count on reliable government policies and support, a highly educated workforce, a strong innovation ecosystem, and of course, a welcoming immigration system. Canada is often recognized as an excellent place to start and scale up a global tech startup. And this is partly because of our Startup Visa program, which helps immigrant entrepreneurs establish businesses in Canada. Those entrepreneurs can also tap into our global skills strategy, which allows Indian companies based in Canada to attract and bring top international talent to work for your company quickly. Of course, this is in addition to our own wealth of talent that we have in Canada in terms of skilled workers. All these advantages, combined with Canada's full and free access to the large US market, make it an ideal nearshore destination for value-added tech activities. In fact, locating your business in Canada also opened the doors to other world markets for your company. In fact, business based in Canada enjoy amazing access to export markets because we have a pretty vast network of trade agreements, and these markets together account for more than 60% of the global GDP. And of course, if you need another reason to look at Canada to establish your business, we are consistently ranked as the best place in the world for the quality of life. But maybe, just as importantly to you, we also have great programs to boost innovation. Indeed, we have built an ecosystem that connects foreign and domestic knowledge with initiatives, incentives, and funding programs. As such, Canada is now home to the world's largest tech hubs, growing and attracting talent from across the globe. And cities such as Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, and Ottawa all rank in CBRE's top 10 tech talent markets in North America. We also have 5 technology super clusters that support companies that choose to innovate in Canada through closer market-facing partnerships with academia and government. We're also recognized as a world leader in AI. We have almost 1,000 AI and machine learning companies in Canada. So what does this all mean for you? As you know, we already have a strong record of collaboration in science, technology, and innovation. Even during the pandemic, our technology partnership has grown. We've seen announcement of new investments and the creation of exciting new bilateral partnerships. I'd like to take just a few seconds to highlight some examples of Canada-India collaborations which could be of interest to you today. I'm sure that you're all familiar with India's Global Innovation and Technology Alliance, but did you know that the Canadian International Innovation Program funds joint industrial R&D projects with the Alliance? And I also know that some of you in the room are working with MyTax. This is kind of a matchmaking program, attracting and deploying top talent to industry. And maybe we could hear from those in the room with experience with MyTax. I'm sure that would be much more credible than whatever I can say about the organization. I would also mention IC Impacts, which bring together researchers, industry leaders, community members, and government officials to find solutions to some of the challenges that we all face, including water management, public health, and food security. In fact, just last week I was in Amritsar, and I visited the Guru Nanak Dev University, and they just signed an MOU with IC Impacts to work on food security. That's just another example of a success story between Canada and India. There's also the Toronto Business Development Center, which recently launched an India-Canada Startup Bridge program. If you want to know more about this, I invite you to speak to Kapil after this session. And of course, many Canadian universities are doing an amazing job creating linkages between Canada and India's own innovation ecosystems. So as you can see, the trade relations between Canada and India is a great story, but I firmly believe that we can do more. The question is how? And part of the answer is the Canada's Trade Commissioner Service, which we call TCS. And the TCS in India is the third largest trade promotion program for Canada in the world, with 8 offices in the country. One in Chandigarh, New Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Hyderabad, and Kolkata. And the TCS is here to offer you any support and assistance you may need. My office in Chandigarh, where I'm based, is fairly small, but I can count on the support of over 50 trade commissioners across the country to help you connect with Canadian expertise. In addition, our footprint in India includes 6 Canadian provinces. I've already mentioned Ontario, but other provinces with office in India include Quebec, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and New Brunswick. So as I said in the beginning, I just arrived in India less than 4 months ago, but it is clear to me that there's great potential to expand our trade relations. I think we can do more to build on the strong people-to-people connections that already exist between Canada and Northern India. All of India, but I'm interested in Northern India here in Chandigarh. And I also see a lot of opportunities for Indian companies that are interested in investing in Canada. We have incentive programs at the federal, provincial, and municipal levels. So thank you again for having me today. I look forward to continuing the discussion this afternoon, but also the coming weeks and the coming months during my time here in Chandigarh. Thank you.
We have the basics of doing business in Canada neatly laid out for us right here in front. And I'm sure many success stories are being scripted as we speak here at TiECon. Well, next up, we're going to be talking about intellectual property, and I need to begin by telling you that prior to assuming his role as the United States IP Counselor for South Asia, our speaker has worked with the US Patent and Trademark Office for over 30 years. And most recently, he was the Regional Director for the Silicon Valley US Patents and Trademark Office in San Jose, California, where he established and led the office. Now, the profound richness of that experience, combined with his present role, which includes advocating for effective IP policies, advising ambassadors and other US government officials on foreign governments' IP practices, educating students, entrepreneurs, startups, and business representatives on the IP landscape, and conducting public awareness programs to support a strong and vibrant IP system globally. You will perhaps get to learn everything that there is to learn about intellectual property. I also need to inform you this, that the IP Counselor for South Asia, he serves Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Let me now hand it over to John Cabeca, United States Intellectual Property Counselor for South Asia, US Embassy. Over to you, John.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to start out, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here in TICON Chandigarh, and it's actually my second TICON event. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I also really love this year's theme and the flight to global entrepreneurship, and the theme of our panel today, the flight for global expansion. And I think as the morning kicked off with our moderator giving an example of the Wright brothers and the first successful flight innovation. The Wright brothers patented that invention, and look at what the aerospace and space tech industries have evolved to today. So I think it does underscore the importance of intellectual property and the importance of its increasingly global impact. And since we're speaking globally, I do want to take a quick moment to wish everyone a happy, somewhat belated World Intellectual Property Day. World Intellectual Property Day, thank you. World Intellectual Property Day takes place on April 26th every year, but I like to call it World IP Day Month, because the days leading up to and following World IP Day, we're extensively out and about across the region promoting the theme for World IP Day. And this year's theme was innovation and youth, and innovating for a better future. And when I look across the room today, I see no better example of our future and the next inventions that we will see to help make our world and our living even better. And I'm also very honored to be on the dais today with the Consul General and Deputy Consul General from Canada and UK respectively. And just while we're all focused on trade, I thought it would be important to talk a little bit about the intersection between trade and intellectual property. There's a few points that I'd like to make. The first is that intellectual property helps to stimulate trade, especially as our economies become more increasingly global. It also helps to encourage investments and technology transfer. IP also offers exclusive rights and the opportunity to obtain those rights internationally while preventing imitators from copying your invention or innovations. So some of you might be in the room saying, well, what is intellectual property? Hopefully none of you is that case. There was a session earlier, just prior to this session, to talk about the basics of IP. But when I talk about IP, I'm talking about patents, trademarks, copyrights, geographic indications, design protection, as well as trade secrets or confidential business information. And the combination of intellectual property does help to stimulate economic growth, as well as create jobs. And one example I'd like to give of that is a study that we did in the US, and we recently released those results, of IP-intensive industries. And we looked at IP-intensive industries which are companies that reinvest a portion of their revenue back into the research and development to create improvements on those technologies and products or new technologies. And a lot of times those investments may be internally within the company, or they might be through partnerships with academic institutions. So looking at these IP-intensive industries, we were awed by the fact that 41% of our gross domestic product in the US, or 7.8 trillion US dollars, 530 lakh crore Indian rupees, of our gross domestic product contributed to these IP-intensive industries. So it goes a long way to show that innovation and the impact that innovation can have on an economy. And when it comes to India, US companies see great opportunity in India. And again, looking around us today, it's easy to see why. And when we look, this helps bring me to the role that intellectual property plays and the relationship of intellectual property protection and investments. And to highlight that, I'll talk about another study a few years ago that OECD had released for developing countries. And this study showed that a 1% increase in patent protection could yield a 2.8% increase in foreign direct investment. A 1% increase in trademark protection could yield a 3.8% increase in FDI, and a 1% increase in copyright protection and copyright activity could yield a 6.8% increase in FDI. So these are pretty dramatic numbers, and it does help to underscore that a strong intellectual property system, which means an intellectual property system with certain predictable, reliable results, as well as one that has effective enforcement mechanisms to deter infringers, counterfeit activity, and piracy, really help to contribute to investments coming into the country. And the states play a very important role with this as well, as the states help support the innovation ecosystem in the state. And they do so by supporting innovation through programs like today, through policies that are established to help curb piracy and counterfeiting. Also to encourage research and development through research institutions, as well as to develop policies to commercialize technology from academia into the marketplace. So in my role, I do a lot of work with all of these different organizations, whether they're academic institutions, state, local, federal, or national governments, as well as working closely with US industries. So I thought I would take a moment now to tell you the three main pillars of my role and my office's focus here in India. And the first is the government-to-government work that we do every day, working with our host governments, sharing best practices and lessons learned from our own experiences, providing technical assistance where necessary, and providing our thoughts and perspectives on draft laws, regulations, and guidelines. The second pillar is the advocacy work that we do on behalf of stakeholders seeking to enter the Indian market, wanting to have a better understanding of how best to protect their intellectual property and a better understanding of the IP and IP enforcement landscape here in the country. And the third pillar is the IP awareness focus, where we engage not just throughout India, but throughout the region on all forms of intellectual property with stakeholders at all levels throughout the innovation ecosystem to help raise awareness for intellectual property, help raise the respect for intellectual property, and to do what we can to help support the innovation ecosystem here in the region. So I mentioned earlier that this was not my first TICON conference. And as you heard in the bio, and thank you for the nice introduction, I was formerly the regional director for the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Silicon Valley office. And so I had the opportunity to attend TICON Silicon Valley a few years ago. And I have to tell you, I was quite amazed when they said, oh, you'll just be in a breakout session, we'll do a little fireside chat and interview you, nothing to worry about, and 750 people showed up for the small breakout session. But it did underscore for me the very strong connection that I felt being out on the West Coast to the entrepreneurial activity here in India. And I felt the tremendous momentum of the innovative activity taking place here. It was drawn to come here and help support those activities. So very happy to be here, and I look forward to continuing our efforts to support India's IP ecosystem. But before I conclude and join the panelists, I wanted to leave you with some key points to think about. And the first one is every global, large technology company today started once as a very small company. And IP was then and is and remains an integral part of their business strategies. And intellectual property can significantly support your goals as well by improving the valuation of your business, making it more attractive to investors, to generate goodwill with partners, investors, manufacturers, to help secure and protect your competitive advantage. And you can also use intellectual property as a business asset and as a potential revenue stream through licensing. And lastly, it's key to securing rights and establishing a presence globally. So as I conclude, I do want to leave you with one final story, if I may. And I had the privilege, the honor, to meet a global CEO of one of the largest companies in the world. Those CEOs that live half their life on their private jet. And I had the opportunity to meet with her, and I asked her, in such a big company with so many different activities going on and different ventures, how was it important to you in your boardroom, the conversation of intellectual property? What did you need to hear in the boardroom from your executives to make intellectual property relevant? And she told me this great story, and so I want to share it with you. She said, beyond the bottom line, always looking at the numbers, looking at your investments, looking at the pros and cons and the risks, when she became CEO on her very first day, her legal team came over and dropped a stack of papers on her desk, and it was $1 billion lawsuit that had been going on for almost 10 years. And she said the team was urging her to make a decision as they needed to file it's a time restriction to file some papers before the courts. And she says, hang on, have we ever talked to our competitor? And they're like, yeah, we talk to them in court all the time. And she's like, wait a minute. She picks up the phone and she calls the CEO from the other company. And she says, why are we doing this to ourselves? Our bottom line is in legal fees, as we fight out these battles. And, in this one particular instance, the case was pretty far gone. It had been 10 years. It was almost near the end. So they decided they would let that play out, but that going forward, they made a commitment to each other that they would not file a suit against each other until they had a conversation at their level. And so a couple months later, her legal team comes running into her again and says, we need to file another case. So she honored her commitment, called the other CEO up, and said, this is what my team is telling me. We need to file this action. He said, let me get right back to you. He called her back and said, you're right. My legal team is contacting your legal team. We'll settle this. We don't need to go to court. And over the course of her tenure, she reduced the IP litigation fees in this company by over 80% just by having a conversation. And it got to the point where once a quarter, he would meet in her airplane hangar, or she would meet in his airplane hangar as they were jetting across the world. And they would talk about issues that these two very highly, very competitive, very innovative companies were facing. And I tell this story for one primary reason. And that is, if it wasn't for the foundation of intellectual property, the second CEO would have never picked up the phone in the first place. And having a strong intellectual property regime also helps, whether you're the smallest inventor in a very small company, it helps to level that playing field to ensure that you have a voice if someone is infringing your IP. So, so I'm very proud to be part of the IP system, and I just wanted to share that with you and looking forward to joining you. So thank you.
I'll talk about jetting across the world and adding pride to entrepreneurship, right? I mean, it's quite simple to put two and two together right now. But thanks a ton, John, for that address. And here is where I bring in our illustrious moderator. Now, she's represented India at the United Nations, and she's also been a part of the core 16-member task force for drafting the AI policy for India, set up by Suresh Prabhu and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India. And these are only two of her achievements that I've spoken to you about. I thought it would be best if I begin with these. She's founded a leading international IP and technology consulting firm, TT Consultants, again with a global presence in DC, San Francisco, Taiwan, Japan, and India. Excel Scout also happens to be a company co-founded by her, a revolutionary AI-based tool which is licensed by companies and universities globally. Please give it up for our moderator, Komal Sharma Talwar, who's also a CNBC Young Turk. All yours.
Thank you for your kind introduction. It's wonderful to have all of you. I think this is the most global panel that we have for the day. And Karen, I'd like to start with you. You've touched upon some topics of free trade agreement between India and UK. I think India and UK have had one of the most successful partnerships in recent history of mankind when they've come together to co-develop the Covishield vaccine between the Serum Institute here and the AstraZeneca Institute in UK. There's been a lot of headlines again, last month about your Prime Minister's visit to our country and conversation around the free trade agreement probably becoming a reality by Diwali this year. Can you tell us a little bit more about the free trade agreement officially, what that would mean for the two countries, how that would double the trade between the two countries, and how would it impact both trade and migration between the two countries?
Is it on? Oh, yes. Thank you. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's really timely to have this discussion today, so soon after the Prime Minister visited. As you said, he was here around 10 days ago. So I think the British and Indian Prime Ministers together made a historic commitment a year ago today, to strengthen work between the UK and India over the next decade. So we're not talking short term here, we're talking long term, 10 years in the first instance. And so back in 2021, we had a new comprehensive strategic partnership, and we launched the 2030 roadmap as well, both public documents which are out there and full of all the details of what we really want to do is bring our countries, our economies, and our people even closer together and boost cooperation in the areas that matter to both countries. And I think these papers that we've agreed together really set that out in great detail. I don't want to go into the detail of that here. I know we're running short of time. So we've got the capability, we've got a shared focus, and we've got unrivaled ties to be India's closest European partner. I'm not going to talk about global partners with my colleagues here. and in many areas, as you said, we already are. And we really now want to transform our bilateral relationship. So the Prime Minister was very keen to visit. He's visited before in other capacities, but he was really keen to visit as Prime Minister. He tried twice last year to come here. Sadly, COVID restrictions permitted him, so it was very definitely top of his list. He wanted to get to India this year, and yes, he made it, and we're all very pleased that he did. It took an awful lot of work to get him here, but he came, he enjoyed it, and he wants to come back, and he's invited Prime Minister Modi to the UK as well. So I think he took his visit, it was a busy visit, he was in Gujarat as well as in Delhi, but it was really an opportunity to celebrate the progress that we've made over the past 12 months. So then it was a virtual meeting when they launched all this cooperation, and then he was actually here in person. He could underline his commitment to India as a real heavyweight in the region, and his desire for us to go further and faster on trade education and technology, those three areas in particular. I know my Canadian colleague just now said that when his minister was here, they announced $1 billion Canadian dollars worth of commercial agreements, and our Prime Minister announced £1 billion worth of new investment and export deals. So I think that just goes to underline, that's two international partners putting in $1 billion, pounds, whatever, a lot of money into this country. Just underlines there's a lot of international interest, there's a lot of opportunity. And I'm sure there's others who will be doing the same in the coming months. You mentioned the free trade agreement. I can't go into a great deal of detail about that. We do want it to double trade between our two countries. We had the first meeting between our trade ministers back in January, which really launched the talks. And the next round will be coming up very shortly. I think if we take it down to grassroots level, what a lot of people in India are hoping to see, should I say what a lot of people in Punjab are hoping to see, is that the 150% import tariff on Scotch whisky is reduced.
So we're all looking forward to that. That's the best news, I think, for the Thai today.
And so, I don't really want to go into the detail on the negotiations. As I say, that I'm not an expert in the negotiations, but as I've been told by other people, the negotiations can be long. I think boring is the word that people use, technical term there. And the end result is not always as we envisaged at the beginning. So I think there's a lot of scope for negotiations. They're underway. We know we want to boost bilateral trade. We know there's a great potential to do that. And I think at the moment we're looking at there's a potential to unlock £28 billion worth in bilateral trade per year. So that's not insignificant. And that's what our experts are going to be working on. And so I just want to sum up and quote our Prime Minister, who said, "I see limitless possibilities for what our two great nations can achieve together." Thank you.
Patrick, over to you. The value of bilateral trade between India and Canada stands at nearly $8 billion today, which makes India Canada's 10th largest trading partner. I know there's been a lot of talk again about the free trade agreement between India and Canada. Apparently there have been 11 rounds of negotiation, and the last one was stalled in 2018. Tell us more about it if you have an official position on that. Is there something that's going to be closing in the near future? Also for our audience today, I think the FTAs that you have between Canada and US and EU are very interesting, because I think if there is a startup here which is based out of Canada, that gives them access to those markets, which could be very, very beneficial for startups. So also please elaborate on your FTAs with the two countries.
Thank you. It's a very good question. On the CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement between Canada and India, we've announced last month the relaunch negotiation with the two countries. So this is extremely good news. Canada is a free trade country. We have, I think, over 50 free trade agreements covering 51 countries. I can't get into the details because our trade negotiators are now talking about this. But what we see, we've heard about the UK, we've heard from other countries, there's a lot of momentum right now in India to look at free trade, so this is all very positive in Canada. Negotiations are ongoing. I think the trade negotiators met again last week or 2 weeks ago, so this is all very positive. And when I say it's positive, it's because we look at what we've done with other countries, like the US or the EU, for example. Our free trade agreement with the US is not new. We had NAFTA, I'm sure that you heard about NAFTA, that came into force, I think it was in 1994, in the 90s anyway. And that free trade agreement eliminated almost all tariffs between Canada and the US. So that meant that you're based in Canada, you have access to the US market. What we did recently, we've modernized that agreement. So it's called, we call it CUSMA, CUSMA for Canada, US, Mexico agreement. I know it has a different name in the US. We tend to put our country first, so it might be USMCA, the US. But the point here is that it's not only the US, Mexico is also included. So just to give you a bit of perspective, if you look at before the pandemic, the trilateral trade between the three countries in North America was over $1 trillion US. 2019. I wouldn't even know how to put that in the Indian numbering system, but that's a lot of money. But with the modernization of this free trade agreement, the CUSMA, what we've added is very modern chapters, including one on digital trade, which would be of interest to most of the people here in the room. Also, there's one chapter on SMEs. So there's an agreement between the three countries to make real efforts to make it easier for SMEs to trade between the three countries. So for SMEs that will be coming to Canada, you have access to a much larger market than you would have if you're just in Canada. And it's the same thing with the EU. So we have the very similar modern agreement which came into force a few years ago with the EU. So again, if you're based in Canada, you have access to the markets of the US, Mexico, and the EU.
John, over to you now. In your previous capacity, you were the regional director for USPT on the West Coast. And the West Coast really means a lot of experience of working with startups and entrepreneurs. A lot of times for startups, IP is looked at as more as an investment. It's complex, it's expensive, and a lot of times we think that we will get something protected later because we avoid it. I was reading about your program that you ran on the West Coast called Speed Dating with Startups on IP. So just for our audience at a very helicopter view, what are the do's and don'ts for startups when they are going into international markets? What would you suggest as a do and a don't? Just 3 each maybe.
Thank you. It's a lot of questions. A couple minutes left. So on speed dating for startups, I'll hit the high one first. We found in Silicon Valley you need a catchy phrase in order to draw startups into the room. So speed dating for startups is a good way, where we rotated in speakers every 20 minutes. One to talk about patents, we talk about trade secrets, we talk about how to build a business plan, how to make a pitch, how to get funded, and those were really successful programs. We did them with community partners. Something that I would love to be welcome to replicate here as well. And another program we had was called Disruptors versus Predators, and this one really underscores for startups that there are so many, unfortunately, there are also bad actors out there that try to take advantage of a new and emerging enterprise. And our Disruptors versus Predators program would talk about certain pitfalls that, whether related to an invention promotion firm that offered to get you a patent but it's fraudulent, or if it related to high interest business loans or cybersecurity threats. And the U.S. government has different divisions that highlight these risks and also have different services to help mitigate the risks, or if you do fall victim, to help you through recovery of any threats you might face. So the Disruptors versus Predators program is one I was really proud of as well. But I think going back to an early stage startup, understanding that intellectual property, it's complex, it's a field of law, we expect it to be complex. One time I had a startup tell me that intellectual property, he was the CEO of a small company, and he said intellectual property gives me brain damage. I just want to take a picture of my innovation and you give me a patent. And I wish it was that easy. Unfortunately, the devil's in the details when it comes to law. But one of the things that startups do have, usually, the very first type of IP a startup creates is normally a trade secret. It's that confidential business information that the startup is still in stealth mode, still innovating, building prototypes, improving, trying to figure out what their marketable product is going to be, and trying to keep all of that information out of the public domain is challenging. So in the US, we have overarching trade secret protection to help with protecting that confidential business information, especially if one of your employees ends up leaving your company and going to a competitor. We have national laws to help protect those trade secrets. India relies on contract law, so it's a little more complicated it's only as good as your contracts generally. And so I think understanding the landscape here and also recognizing when you need to take that extra step and when you're ready to go public, to make sure that before you go public, you actually seek some sort of patent protection if a patent strategy is in your business strategy. And I say that because in India, it's an absolute novelty state where if any pre-filing disclosure, any disclosure you make related to your invention prior to filing can be used as information that may inhibit your ability to get the patent protection. In the US, we have a 12-month grace period where public disclosure prior to 12 months you can still get patent protection. So I think it's important to keep in mind, if you do have global aspirations, you want to make sure that you're keeping things out of the public domain until absolutely necessary, and to take the steps to protect your IP strategy, your business interests before going public. So those would be.
Thank you. So India has the third largest number of startups in the world after US and UK, Patrick. And I'm sure that what startups are looking at right now is really to very quickly get into markets, get visas, get access to markets, get an ecosystem where they're able to grow and scale up very quickly. Any specific startup programs that Canada is offering right now? I believe you've got a very successful one called the Startup Visa Program that I was reading about. Please.
Yes, thank you. I can say a few words very quickly on the Startup Visa Program because it's a very successful one which has been used extensively by startups. It's a little bit technical, but I'm happy to provide more details to anyone who would be interested after this. But basically, if you apply to this program and you're successful, you could get a temporary work permit, which will allow you to travel to Canada and set up your business in Canada. Now, for this program to work, you need to be matched with what we call, I believe, designated organization. And there are 3 types of organizations in Canada. They're all listed on our website. So the first category is venture capital funds. So if you have a partnership with them, we'll make sure that the VC will provide a certain amount of funding for your project. It can also be angel investors. They also have a different setting for funding that they would have to provide. And then incubators. And for that third category, I don't think there's any need for funding to be involved, but you need to be accepted in a very specific program. And then there's a number of technical requirements in terms of how much you own in the company and how much your designated organization partners will. But that will allow you to come and launch. And it's been used, as I said, extensively by startups, foreign startups.
Carolyn, any such programs that UK is offering specifically for startups, especially in the area of fintech, because you're one of the best destinations for fintech companies in the world?
Thank you. We do have several visa systems for people wanting to come and start up in the UK. I would say that setting up a business in the UK takes on average 5 days. I hope my colleagues here aren't going to say, oh, don't go to the UK, we can do it much quicker in our countries. But I think 5 days is pretty good. We have a Inward Investment Office, which was started a couple of years ago by the Prime Minister, which basically offers for people, companies looking to invest in the UK, it offers to take down the barriers for them, any blockages, whatever, bring it to the attention of the office. They are staffed by experts on trade and investment, take your problems to them and they will help sort it out and ease entry into the markets. And if I could just add that on education, we have a couple of visas, new visa schemes now, whereby if you're in the UK studying as a graduate, you can now apply for an extra 2 years, which enables you to work, or if you've been studying for a PhD, you can get an extra 3 years now on your visa, and that is applicable not just to you, but to your partner and your children as well, if they come with you.
I think we don't have time for too many more questions, but the last question would be really around any regional success stories that Carolyn and Patrick you want to share with us especially from the region of Punjab, and what are the thrust areas that you're looking at as a government to work with, with the Punjab government, say in the next 1 or 2 years?
I think in terms of success stories, I'd like to hear from the room because I see it.
Yeah, so I think I'm a big fan of the way Canada has kind of done a basic hand-holding with us. Your trade commissioners, your High Commission has been very helpful in us setting up an office in Canada. And we've got some great AI talent there. We've expanded our teams big time there. And a lot of our AI research has got funded by the Canadian government. So we've had a fantastic experience ourselves with the way Canada has helped us to expand our business and get AI talent.
But in terms of area, I think the sky is the limit. I spoke a little bit about AI. This is clearly one of our strengths, but if you look at all clean tech, for example, renewable energy, there's so much potential that I could spend another hour talking to us about this. Maybe we can continue offline.
Actually, I think Patrick has said it all there. I think, great potential in the region, agri-tech, climate change, net zero, e-mobility, great areas. We're already working very small bits in those areas already, great potential to do a lot more. One cooperation in particular that happened just last week, people might have seen it in the newspapers, but really good collaboration between the Montreal University in Ludhiana and Birmingham City University. They've got together, they're organising and offering a course on entrepreneurship. It's going to be starting in May. There's 30 places. I think apply soon if you're interested, but it will really train, educate students in how to make a pitch and how to get their idea funded. I think that's something that perhaps there's big potential for that here. There's so many people with great ideas and wanting to start up, maybe not quite having the expertise. So that's what is being offered now, and it's Montreal University, Ludhiana with Birmingham City University.
John, how about you? What are the priority areas that you're going to be working with the Indian government on the intellectual property side?
So we have a very good relationship in working on, as I mentioned before, the government-to-government work that we do every day. I think it was highlighted in this past November in a ministerial trade and promotion forum, ministerial between our U.S. Trade Representative and the Minister of Commerce, where we reconfirmed the commitment to work together to understand the value that innovation brings to incentivizing investment, as well as the importance of securing intellectual property along those lines. During that meeting, we discussed many issues across all the different forms of intellectual property, and this last ministerial we made some progress on some copyright issues as well, but it boils down to, as I mentioned before, where our key focus is sharing best practices, being able to relay what we hear from our stakeholders on any challenges they may be having in navigating the intellectual property landscape here, being able to translate that with the government. So far, we have an excellent relationship. Thank you.
I think we can open up to the audience for probably 1 or 2 questions before we conclude the session. I believe there are no questions. Yeah. So I think you were fantastic. I think with the clarity we brought, so there are no questions. So thank you so much to the 3 panelists for the amazing global flight that you took us to the UK, US, and Canada. Thank you.
I'm going to ask our respected panelists to stay back for a moment, please. Now, the airplane has become the first World Wide Web, bringing people, languages, ideas, and values together. That's what Bill Gates said about the Wright brothers, and I couldn't find a more fitting panel to fit this quote in, because the two seem to fit like the pieces of a puzzle. On that note, I would love to thank our panelists for this interesting discussion. And to felicitate them, I would like to invite on the dais Mr. J.V. Singh, past President, TiE Chandigarh. Ladies and gentlemen, first up, Mr. John Quebeca, United States Intellectual Property Counselor for South Asia, US Embassy. Ms. Caroline Rowett, British Deputy High Commissioner. And Mr. Patrick Herbert, Consul General of Canada in Chandigarh. It shouldn't sound so empty, you know. We can do better in terms of applause, please. And our moderator, Ms. Komal Talwar, founder TT Consultants and founder Excel Scout. Thank you so much to our distinguished panelists. We've trotted the globe and, we are back right here in this room. I think with this panel, mentally we were transported to another place and we had all these dreams of taking our startups global from local, right? But it's now time to go a little further. If you can keep your head, then all about you are